Добрый день, переводчик на связи. Подтвердите, что слышно.
Да, вас слышно.
Тогда кто-то меня должен назначить переводчиком. У переводчика не появился значок каналов.
Да, секундочку.
Спасибо.
Случилось в раньшее время, притом на одном и том же сроке, на 8 неделях. Когда-то об этом было тяжело говорить. Сейчас, как Владимир сказал, мы
Включить звук.
Доброе утро, это Марио.
Здравствуйте, Мария.
Здравствуйте. Вы видите презентацию?
Вы также можете режим полного экрана включить.
Вы видите презентацию?
Да, мы видим презентацию.
ECMR с грузовиками, да?
Вы также можете сделать на полный экран.
Как?
Вы можете на полный экран привести. Вот там кнопочка внизу.
Где вы? Так.
Вот, и стрелочками можете теперь навигировать.
Ну сейчас полный экран.
Да, и стрелочками можете делать навигацию. Ну, как это?
Да. Ну сейчас полный экран у вас.
Да.
Ага, хорошо, спасибо. Инесса, вы на месте?
Да, я на месте.
Ага. Потому что я буду делать презентацию отсюда. Хорошо. Вы видите на полном экране презентацию, да?
Да, видео ваше пока не видим, видим только презентацию.
Хорошо, я сейчас, ну, вы, вот меня. Сейчас только чтобы Ребекка появилась. Хорошо. Я прекращу сейчас презентацию, чтобы виден был плакат. Инесса, как мы сделаем с рекомендациями? Будем ссылать среди людей или как?
Технически, да, мы можем это сделать.
Доброе утро.
Доброе утро.
Мария, давайте, наверное, мы будем собирать те рекомендации, предложения, которые к нам поступают, обрабатывать, а потом, когда уже будет более или менее приемлемая версия, можно будет тогда распространить, чтобы в последний день...
Я согласен, я согласен.
Чем меньше подготовительная группа, тем быстрее у нас смогут появиться конкретные предложения и описание всего семинара. Благодарю вас.
Спасибо.
тоже хорошо.
Доброе утро. Good morning. It's already time to start the second day of our seminar. Yesterday we had very good attendance. Just for those who are joining us today, please bear in mind that this seminar is using Zoom and we have interpretation. You have to go to the bar, to the lower bar of your screen. There you can see interpretation. If it is not switched on, if it says just off, please choose a language, either English or Russian, and you can follow the seminar. My name, for those who are joining, is Mario Apostolov. I'm the regional advisor in trade facilitation in UNECE. And we are co-organizing this seminar with our Ukrainian partners. Для тех, которые включаются сейчас, просто чтобы указать, мы используем Zoom с переводом, и внизу вы можете найти на нижнем, ниже можете найти перевод, interpretation, и там можете включить свой язык, русский или английский. Спасибо. Я продолжу на английском. Yesterday, we had a fruitful discussion of the overall concept of sharing data in transport and trade documents along digital corridors. We discussed what was done since the previous Odessa seminar in terms of mapping the data in several documents, what data is repeated. And we discussed the possibility to go forward, developing standards for developing electronic documents using the UNECE basic standards, semantic standards like co-component, the UNECE reference data models. Sue Probert, the chairperson of UNECE, explained models can be used. Then we had a good conversation on integrating in this exercise what has been done on railway, in the railway mode. We had the Deputy Secretary General of the International Committee on Rail Transport, Eric Eftimov, who is also who presented their work on an electronic CIM SMGS consignment note, and representative of UNECE's Transport Division. In the afternoon, we discussed the practical implementation of these instruments in the digital corridors project in Eastern Europe. There were people from Belarus, Azerbaijan, the Deputy Director General of Azeri Customs who participated, and we had a very good discussion. We started drafting recommendations, especially on the need for collaborative work among organizations, among countries to develop further tools for data sharing among modes of transport, documents, and processes in this concept. We will be collecting recommendations today as well, so please bear that in mind. Today, the work will be concentrated on one particular example to continue the logic of yesterday's discussion. We will look at the ECMR consignment note, the consignment note carried by road. We mentioned yesterday that it is very important now to standardize the electronic exchange of data, especially in documents accompanying goods. Yesterday we discussed briefly one such consignment note, the railway consignment note, which is being developed and discussed by CIT and other like OSGD and other organizations. And today we will focus on the example of the CMR consignment note. The first speaker who will present UNECE's view is Rebecca Huang from the UNECE Transport Division. Rebecca, are you already on the call?
Yes, Mario.
I see you there. Okay, I will upload your presentation shortly.
Do I start now?
Do you see your presentation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so you tell me when to switch the slides.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Duper Ultra. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to be part of your webinar today and to share with you, give you an introduction to the ECMR, but the mother convention on what it's based on, the CMR. So apologies if some of you know this already, but I wasn't part of the webinar yesterday, and I heard that there was a desire to know more about the legalities of this of conventions, but given the interest in the road transport, definitely in the ECMR. So, and I don't mind later on in the conversation if you're asking questions on the technical aspects, but my presentation will cover the legal aspects, which will lead into, and I guess form that important basis for which the technical components will be based on. The other thing I want to mention before I start is to say apologies, my camera is not working, but I hope this is not a deterrent to my presentation this morning. So next slide, please, Mario. The CMR stands for the Convention on the Contract for the International Carriage of Goods by Road. It's a well-established convention. It's been around since the 1950s. And it applies where there are three conditions present. There is a contract for the carriage of goods by road in vehicles for reward. So that is, it's for a commercial transaction. The second condition is if the origin and the destination are situated in two different countries. And thirdly, at least one of those countries has to be a contracting party to the CMR convention. This is a unique convention for us at the UNECE because it's actually, it mostly concerns private law here. And it's, as I mentioned, it's been well established since the 1950s as a proof of the carriage contract between a sender and a carrier. Next slide, please. To date, there are 56 contracting parties to the CMR around the world. As you can see from the map, this is mostly in the European region, but we also have Central Asian countries and in North Africa as well, with Morocco and Tunisia, and also it's gone into West Asia with Iran and Pakistan recently. It's important that I share this because in order to accede to the ECMR, the contracting part, one must already be, a country must already be the contracting party to the CMR. So that forms very much that entry point, if you will, into being able to accede to the ECMR. Next slide, please. Here on this slide, you have a visual of a paper CMR. The CMR convention does not actually specify the precise format. It does specify and precise the particulars to go into a consignment note. And here I just gave an example because this is one that is been very popular and adopted, and it was one actually produced by RRU. But just to clarify, the convention itself does not actually specify a particular layout or format. So, as I said, the CMR, it concerns a, it's about a carrier's contract. So it concerns contract conditions, the contract document, which we know as the consignment note, as well as the carrier's liability, and it sets those liability limits in case there is a total or partial loss of the goods that are being transported, or if there is a delay. Next slide, please. On this particular slide, I've laid out the 11 mandatory particulars of a consignment note. I don't go into all of them, but I have them here so you have them in a handy place and you know where what these mandatory particulars are. And this may be found in Article 6, Paragraph 1 of the CMR. Now, in Para 2, it provides for some optional particulars. And if you're interested, you can ask that question and I'm happy to share that. But just because of the time, I will just go on. And Paragraph 3 also allows for including any other particulars which the parties may deem useful. Now, again, I say that why we are going over this, it's important because in the ECMR additional protocol, we have Article 4, Paragraph 1 that states that an electronic consignment note shall contain the same particulars as the paper consignment note. Next slide, please. So, when the CMR was came into force, into effect, the world was a very different place. And some years ago, about 10 years, slightly over 10 years ago, it was considered that we would be moving to an age where there would be more digitalization. And so it was really forward thinking that the policymakers, the people attending the Working Party on Road Transport, SC1, for which I'm working in the Secretariat for, actually thought to have an additional protocol to the CMR, which would allow for a paper consignment note to be digitalized. Next slide, please. So the CMR, the eCMR, which was actually introduced in 2008, but it came into effect after a certain number of contracting parties had entered into it. It came into effect in 2011. And to date, so it's not been around for a long time, but to date, we have 25 contracting parties. And it's very pleasing to note that the number of accessions has more than doubled since 2016, when there were just 11. So far, we have 25 contracting parties, with Sweden being our most recent contracting party in March last year. So we're getting an average of about 5 to 7 new contracting parties a year, and there's been indications of more interest of countries, especially in the European region, to accede to the eCMR. Next slide, please. So here, what I wanted to do is to take us through the core articles in the eCMR. It's actually a very short document, the eCMR, compared to even the CMR. And it just has 16 articles in the eCMR, so it's short and sweet. 5 of these articles actually relate to the operationalization of the eCMR, and probably why it's also short and sweet is because it's based on the CMR. So it does not replicate, it replicates the CMR in that sense, but it doesn't repeat it. It just says, you know, all of those, the framework is preserved, and those conditions that they need to be also part of electronic consignment notes. So looking at those particular parts of the eCMR that are particular to electronic consignment notes, we have, and I have here on the slide here, those 3 core articles. I won't go into all the detail, but I will just mention briefly what they are, what they relate to. And the first is Article 3, and it relates to the authentication of the electronic consignment note. And the key phrase here in that article, I have put here, reliable electronic signature. Article 4 lays out the conditions for establishment. Article 5 sets out the 6 aspects that the carrier, the sender, and any other party, which we commonly know as the consignee, who are interested in the performance of the contract of carriage, need to agree on. And my next slide actually does lay out some of these 6 aspects of Article 5. But before we go into that, and I think I don't need to really go into that because you'll see it on the slide, I also want to mention that there is a bit more background that was provided in the explanatory memorandum to the additional protocol. And it sheds some more light, I guess, on how the drafters envisage this particular legal instrument to be implemented. And so there are 3 conditions that there have been specified in the explanatory memorandum for the protection and the security of documents. So that was very much the focus of this explanatory memorandum. And it said that the first condition was the inalterability of the message. And this is actually reflected in having this Article 4. And then having the second condition, which is the understanding and acceptance of the message by the consignee, again, also reflected in the provisions of Article 4. And the third condition is that the identification of the parties and the security of the authentication of their signatures, that's a very fundamental part, and that's reflected in Articles 3 and 4 of the eCMR. So I would like to suggest that data integrity and agreement on the procedures and implementation are at least at a very high level, the two elements needed to implement the ECMR. Next slide, please. So I won't go into this because the time is going, but this is Article 5. It lays out those 6 aspects that I mentioned that must be present, must occur in order for the electronic consignment note to be implemented. Next slide, please. I will finish here with this particular slide to give you an update of some significant developments from the UNECE SC1 Working Party on Road Transport side. So I mentioned that we have been seeing many new accessions every year. The other thing to mention is that, and I believe that Sue would have mentioned this yesterday, that there was the launch of UN CFAC technical standards focused on ECMR, and that was launched in April 2018. And there's the web link to those particular standards. There was a guidance note that SC1 approved at its session last year on the legal aspects of the ECMR, and there's a link there. It's also available in Russian. I did not attach the Russian link, apologies, but if you go into that particular link, you may find that quite close to the English version. And this elaborates more on these legal aspects that I'm just really going through very quickly. And last but not least, there has been a creation of an informal group of experts, also in October last year, to prepare a paper for our Inland Transport Committee to detail research and further recommended actions for the implementation of ECMR. I will stop here. I have gone through it quite quickly, but I hope that that was helpful, and I'm here to take questions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rebecca, for this quite clear and concise presentation. Like you mentioned, Sue, probably will speak a bit later on the work on the ECMR in UNCFAC. And I would suggest that we go first through the presentations and then we collect questions. Well, as yesterday, people can prepare and ask those questions on the chat, in the chat area of our screens. So we have on the agenda as the next speaker Mr. Konstantinos Alexopoulos from also from the Transport Division of UNECE. Konstantinos, would you like to take the floor?
Mario, actually, good morning to everybody, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. Actually, I will only say a few words because I was actually co-presenting with Rebecca the presentation on CMR, and I would like to raise only 2 issues that are very important for us and for the UNECE Transport Division, and this is what we are working on, and especially my colleague Rebecca as the Secretary of the Working Party on Road Transport. First of all, we have to make sure that we have a method for the issuance and delivery of the ECMR, and that we have to ensure that the ECMR retains its integrity. So it means practically that in some years from now on, we are not facing a situation where ECMR becomes obsolete, when in practical terms, all these years we had this CMR framework convention, which is an example, if you wish, of really sustainable, if you wish, UN conventions. Having said that, I want to tell you that we will start also a project soon, where the Islamic Development Bank will be the donor. The beneficiaries will be the 10 member states of the ECO Secretariat in Tehran, of the Economic Cooperation Organization in Tehran. And this project will have 2 main objectives. The one would be the capacity building to promote accession to the additional protocol of the CMR. So we want to promote the ECMR accession to this region. And the second one, which we also will find important and to be connected with the work being done by you, by creative vision, and by having prepared the standards for ECMR, which is the implementation of ECMR through providing technical specifications for this implementation, for the implementation of ECMR. So we would like to see the views of the countries of this specific region, how they would like to see ECMR to be implemented, and to see some good practices and evaluate some good practices with them. And as I told you, we're having as a main objective that ECMR retains its integrity. So I don't want to spend more of your time. I just wanted to compliment you with the presentation done by my colleague Rebecca. And I saw from the participants there are many people that I know, and I hope everybody is well and stay safe. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to deliver even this short message this morning. Thank you very much, Mario.
Thank you. So thank you, Kostas. There was a question from one of the participants to give more details about pilot projects on ECMR implementation. I think we are going to talk about it the whole day. So maybe Rebecca, when we have Rebecca and Kostas, when we have our discussion, you can tell us more. And one of those people who can tell us more is Rudy Hemeler from Luxembourg, who has been working on the ECMR for several years now. May I give the floor to Rudy to make his presentation.
Good morning from the lockdown office in Luxembourg. I hope you hear me. I've prepared a short presentation of about 7 minutes to give you from the perspective of both governments, but also from logistics operators, where we are today with the ECMR and where we are expecting to go in the next 36, 48 months. First, something about myself. My roots are in air cargo, but 50% of my time I'm working for private organizations, mostly in multimodal transport. The other 50%, I'm advisor of the Luxembourg government, where I'm coordinating the ECMR project and the EFTI implementation project. And part of my time I'm representing in that navigation as a member of the DTLF, the Digital Transport and Logistics Forum, where I'm also member of two very big European consortiums. I will take one word later on in the presentation. So if I look at the customers, so my own focus is today on multimodal road transport that exits the Benelux, enter Europe through the Benelux, whereby we see that road transport is very, very important in the context of multimodal supply chains. If we look at it into this electronic the supply chains, we see that the electronic consignment nodes are becoming more and more important. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is to achieve an end-to-end visibility within the supply chain. And that is necessary for smarter planning. Smarter planning means today, and even more today in Corona times, improved customer service, better asset and capacity utilization, and also using that information to offer new digitized services, which can then become a source of innovation for other things which are based on these services. Within the context of today's presentation, it's also essential to keep an eye on an objective that from the perspective of logistics operators, it's very important to use the same data which are available at the source of the supply chain for commercial transport and border control purposes. But since 3 weeks, maybe already 4 weeks, time goes fast, Since Corona times, electronic consignment notes are top important for two other reasons. First of all, avoid paper contact. So contact is a key word, and also to see how the data can be used in green lanes. So the ECMR today, making it, it's always nice to have a very good introduction presentation by Rebecca and her team. But if I simplify it a little bit, the ECMR is an agreement. It's also a handover of goods, two times, when the goods are received by the truck driver and when they are delivered by the truck driver. Within Europe, it's very important that the document, so the fourth sheet of the paper document, is the proof of intra-community delivery, because the VAT services, the VAT is due in the country of consumption. And we also see a growing importance of the data of the CMR for compliance to government regulations. So the ECMR, especially in the Benelux, there are 13 ECMR providers participating to the Benelux project. And we see today that these ECMR providers, they all are delivering cloud services with real-time access to all parties, so that if the truck driver reports an event, immediately this information is available in the portal, but also can generate automated alerts to the different contracting parties or the notified parties. Of course, one of the advantages of using an ECMR is that the transport service provider can start immediately invoicing when he gets the proof of receipt. The systems are, of course, important for archiving reasons, but I think one of the very important features, which are not really part of the original ECMR convention ideas, is to use the information, the digital information, for collaborative planning and EDA calculation. So when we started the DTLF, the EU Digital Transport and Logistics Forum, a couple of years ago, we immediately saw that there was a good opportunity to use the MMT, the multimodal transport reference model that Sue will explain more in detail, to use that model to create a standard for a global multimodal data integration, message integration originally, which has two dimensions, a business to business and a business to administration dimension. By the way, this was the reason why we selected the multimodal transport reference model and not really the WCO model. So looking at that ECMR standard, first of all, that ECMR standard is, as Rebecca indicated, already available since April 2018. So you can download it free of charge, you can use it. It is based on MMT. We developed it with a team of experts under the leadership of Ayeru, whereby we have a couple of characteristics which makes it of high value for the near coming future. First of all, it's a global standard. It's called CMR, but we sometimes prefer to call it a notification. It's multimodal, and that's very important. The design is from base out multimodal. That means that there are consignment items. It's business to business, business to administration. It's neutral. There is a governance in place. It's aligned with WCO EU CDM because of the nature of the overall modeling. It's free of charge and available in multiple formats. I'm using it myself, for instance, in an XML format today. Sue is going to explain this much more in detail, but I think that what we see on the left side is that the ECMR is really part, this was a little bit too fast, this was part of the UNECE FACT multimodal reference model, which means that there is also a maintenance in place. So we are right now in release D20A. And it's important that all the messages which are part of the same family, that they are continuously aligned with each other. So if something adds in one model, the new features or the new definitions are available automatically in the next release for everyone. It's also like that. This is very important on the right side, that the ECMR consignment node, it's really ready for other transport modes, as 90% of all the attributes are common to all transport modes, consigned equal carrier, or sometimes they differ a little bit. And we also reuse the UNCFACT core components, so that when adding new messages or extending the messages, it's really easy to just go and extend to a new environment. So we say now, we are a couple of years later, we have in the Benelux made a survey indicating that supply chains can save up to 13 euro per ECMR, but we see that there is still a very slow adoption rate. A very slow adoption rate because the end users, they want to have an harmonized regulation. They want to use the same regulation with whatever country they are heading to. They want to have an harmonization of the data integrations standards. They want to have solutions. SME stands for small and medium enterprises. They want solutions which are as easy as Dropbox, as secure as e-banking. Larger companies want to use their own systems. And we clearly see that there is also a requirement to use real-time messaging, to use publish and subscribe architectures. So need for an open API specification. I now see it with the eyes of the Benelux. We see that the answer to the requirements on the left side, they are upcoming. The EU has published or is publishing a proposal which has now been accepted by the EU Council, is probably going to be voted by the Parliament in the second half of this year. Is an EFTI regulation, and EFTI stands for Electronic Freight Transport Information. And what is very specific there is that when it becomes applicable in 5 years, the EFTI regulation says that governments, that member states, EU member states, must accept this transport information in a digital format, in a harmonized format, which is machine readable and delivered through EFTI service providers. The EFTI regulation has been very much inspired by the Benelux ECMR project. This Benelux ECMR project, which is completely based on the UNECE 2008 ECMR convention, but with a couple of features which are also extended to Europe. I'm coming back on the EU federated architecture in one slide more, but what is very specific about the Benelux is that we see, despite the fact that 25 countries have been adopting the protocol, and maybe one of the countries has not the right color, but I think so, we see that the Benelux has set up a pilot project for 3 years, ending this year, but probably in principle extended until EFTI becomes applicable. And the Benelux has done this pilot project because Belgium did not adopt the ECMR protocol, because Belgium said we want to have a way to trust the data which are presented in an electronic format, but also to verify this data. And that means that to use the ECMR in the Benelux, you need to have your ECMR hosted by an ECMR IT service provider, which has been certified, which has been authorized, and that offers a system that can be accessed by government authorities. So we are right now extending the ECMR Benelux project until the EFTI, the European EFTI regulation becomes applicable, whereby we want to create a common access point where the different authorities, road control authorities, customs, they have one access, one API to a common access point in such a way that they can access multiple ECMR providers, multiple EFTI providers. Reality, we are studying this access point. We are looking what are the registry components where we can use blockchain and environment, but also we are in the process using standards, using the ECMR standard as a basis to create one app for authorities, one application for authorities, so that with this one app, they can access all the data, the transport related data, which is presented by a truck driver coming from wherever out of one of the countries which adopted the ECMR regulation. So we are using the Benelux as a living lab. We are planning to extend the ECMR data set to include all the EFTI data elements which are necessary for the EU EFTI regulation. We start with government authorities, but it will also be extended into a business-to-business project. And we are looking to define and implement in a living lab environment, how can we define metadata and a search engine to find the documents, to find the data. And yes, that's very important. It's already in our planning to extend the project with other modes of transport, in principle, at least already with inland navigation. So as a consulting company, I'm a member of one of the DTLF consortiums. Yesterday we spoke about Phoenix, today we spoke about Federated. And this DTLF consortium has a very specific objective. The objective is to create for logistics operators and for government agencies an architecture which is as simple as the one that you use today to connect your mobile to anyone around the world who is accepting you to talk with them. So we want to create one access, one identification, one authentication, one authorization, one common authorization process to access an ultra decentralized architecture, federated architecture of platforms. So the initial idea is the key word, which is do not copy information, but have a seamless integration through standards, through multiple standards. And it's also going to be an event architecture with a publish and subscribe mechanism for those entitled. Within the UNCFACT transport expert team, we launched a concept, an architecture, whereby we see that we are going from today's environment into an environment where API architect, federated API architecture enables the different players of the actors of a supply chain to share their data with the other ones, to share their data as data sets. And we see here that the future ECMR project, because we are planning to extend the current ECMR project, is going to be, has a focus of this integration of road transport with multimodal supply chains, whereby the data of the ECMR can, for instance, in this case, be automatically integrated with the data at the source of the shipper. You see there the concepts, EFTI dataset, API, publish, subscribe, events, authorization. The events are, of course, key. The events are key. We see them in the new UNCFACT project, the EDI3 project, whereby we are writing white papers and trying to understand how can we leverage all the intelligence, the content of our reference data models into a web services environment, an API environment. We also see it in the air cargo one record project of IATA. IATA is part of the federated consortium, whereby we again see the importance to share data between the different actors, to share data between actors that are using a common API reference model, a common open API architecture, of course, whereby the data elements of these APIs must be aligned with each other. The reference model of the federated consortium is going quite fast, also far in the structure, also to make sure that events are the glue between the different IT systems which are communicating through APIs. So if I look into the follow-up project of the ECMR, we expect to go from a document-based concept, because today the ECMR, as we started, was starting from the document, towards a multimodal dataset. A multimodal dataset which is also which has an API defined, which enables the shipper, the road service providers, handling agents, other modes of transport, authorities, border control agencies to share the data, to access the data, which is still under the ownership of the road transport service providers. On the left side, we see also another challenge. That is that we see a lot of initiatives whereby road transport is part of the picture and whereby standards are introduced. The MMT, the EU FTI, Federated, the Customs, the Phoenix, GS1, IATA, RISCOMIX is inland navigation, DCSA is container shipment, IPSCA is port communities. But if we look at that from the ECMR follow-up project, we are going to, of course, have a huge benefit of starting from a multimodal transport reference model, which can be then aligned with the different data integration standards. Aligned means that the essential information that we can make sure it can be mapped to the multimodal transport model. In that practice, once more, we will take the EFTI regulation and make sure that all the data elements which are required for the EU regulation will be part of the ECMR coming up. So, in summary, the follow-up project, I put 36 months because 36 months is also the timeline when the EU will be defining the EFTI regulation. And I put up the initial ideas to start where we start from a follow-up project. We will probably not call it ECMR project anymore, but maybe transport data set. We extend it to all the transport data which are shared within the supply chain and with government authorities. We make sure that EFTI is included. We also make sure that it is aligned with multiple standards. We do it together with EU, with WCO, with GS1, but probably also with several of the other parties which are on the left side. And the key element, the key glue is that we use the multimodal logical data model as the underlying basis to keep everything together. If you would ask, and the APIs, do we need new technology? Yes. But on the other hand, we are going to use the definitions in our reference data models to make sure that we have a way to maintain it and to integrate it with other modes of transport. I guess I could be a little bit over my 7 minutes, but many thanks for having the opportunity to share these slides with you.
Many thanks to you. It is a very informative, it was a very informative presentation. I'm sure that people are very much interested to ask questions, but you are right, we are advancing with time. And there were questions already regarding security, pilot projects. I think you answered most of them. And now, after the next presentation, which is Sue Probert, we can have more questions and answers to the speakers. It was very interesting to see in your presentation how you can link the work on the ECMR to this idea of multimodal transport data set, which is the essence of what we were discussing at these Odessa seminars last year and this year. And also it was interesting to see how you link it to the new technology, which is JSON APIs. Okay, but probably we'll leave these questions after Sue. Sue Probert is going to talk us more about how the UNCFACT tools were used to produce a standard for ECMR. Sue, are you available?
Yes, I'm available.
Please, thank you. Nice.
I'm fighting with the technology as usual, but I think I am sharing my screen with with my presentation, but I'm just surprised. Okay, so share. It's the share button I keep forgetting, right? Okay. So you have something of my presentation, but it's at the wrong point. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the previous presentations, which have certainly dealt with the legal aspects from UNECE, which was very welcome. Thank you, Rebecca and Kostas. Now, we were followed by Rudy's much more practical presentation explaining how the reuse of the standard that we developed back in 2018 is being reused and is hopefully going to be the reference that everyone can use to enable ECMR implementations to work in all environments. My job now is to talk about the standards a little bit drier, but I'm going to introduce how we came about, how we actually made this standard that has been published since 2018. So first, before I start on the ECMR, I'd just like to add a little to what I said yesterday, because it's really important. We've seen already in our presentations how relevant the paper documents still are after all these years since the UN layout key was introduced in the 60s and 70s. We still see so much paper and so much confidence in the data being expressed in terms of what data goes in which box, aligned to which legal basis. This is very important. I did touch on the legal aspects yesterday. To be successful in digitalization, we need to consider the legal aspects as well as the other aspects that we've covered. So I'm highlighting here the UN Trade Data Element Directory, which is a unique standard which has been around also since the 1970s, which enables us to get a link between a data element in an electronic digitized message structure, data exchange structure, with the position on a piece of paper where that data would be in a legal framework. It's the only place where that information is available. So I did mention it briefly yesterday, but I wanted to highlight it. The other thing about this slide is that the multimodal reference models that we've talked about, the buy-ship pay we talked about, these have not come about in a short time. These are the basis of 20 to 30 years of continuous work by UNCFACT to try and reflect always new technologies, but also to ensure that we have the links with the established and still very well used technologies, so that we always provide migration paths. And that's why I wanted to show this slide, to show that we have very trustable libraries that are very well maintained, covering EDIFACT, covering the UN layout key and the schemas and the reference data models. So that's me selling CFACT, as indeed I should as the chair. I'm just repeating this slide from yesterday, showing that we have an overall international supply chain reference model called the Buy, Ship, Pay, which covers the aspects of supply chain buyer seller, sales contracts, and deliveries. And then it also covers the multimodal transport, the movement of goods, and also it covers the regulatory aspects where the data for regulatory reporting is held within the business-to-business data, and this regulatory reference data model is able to highlight where that data is, which we hope will be a great bridge to the reporting requirements from the authorities. For example, our sanitary certificates, phytosanitary certificates, the UNECE standards for these, and certificate of origins are being developed at the moment so that we have more and more regulatory requirements covered. But I want to talk about this middle section here, the multimodal transport reference data model this morning. This is an example of how we develop a customized data exchange structure from the overall multimodal transport reference model, which covers a lot of different requirements from different modes and from different aspects of transport, not only contracts, but also operational. What we do here is that the semantic model is overall, then we have the multimodal MMT, which is related, is a subset of it, but totally still related to the cargo data for the sales contracts and also the regulatory links. And then we have the ECMR message model, and then we produce the XML syntax, which is what we publish. Now, for some reason, my slide doesn't want to move forward. It's because it builds. So I'm going to ignore the builds, but this will be distributed anyway with all that information. I'm sure Mario would agree. So this is where you can find the information. As Lance mentioned in his presentation yesterday, there is a streamlined presentation of UNECE standards covering all of the standards, the business standards that we have for data exchange structures and for our business requirement specifications. And these are all on the page, as you can see here, all available very easily from the UNECE website. The particular section, which is for the ECMR, this is what we published for the ECMR. And Lance mentioned these yesterday. The BRS is the business requirement specification. We have an open development process for all our projects. The ECMR was a classic project. We've brought together all the right people from all the right backgrounds. We had very close collaboration with UNECE on the CMR, ECMR protocols. We had close association as it was led by someone who worked for the IRU. And we had a lot of business and transport representatives as well, including Rudy, you just heard from. So all of the results of all this was a BRS, which I'll show you a little bit about. It describes the processes that are covered, the scope of the processes covered by the data exchange standard. And then we have information about how to reuse it in different formats, which Rudy has already mentioned. The challenge that we had, and Rebecca, you mentioned this in your presentation, the CMR convention talks about the carrier, the sender, and the consignee. One of the interesting challenges we had is that in the digitalized world, the sender is the person who sends an electronic data stream, and the consignor is the word that we use to make sure that we're clear about who is consigning the goods as a party in the contract. So we had to discuss that and make sure that we understood exactly how we're moving from the paper world to the digitalized world, and to understand and provide the links. We also provide the paper box references between the ECMR data stream and the paper version of the CMR, and we do use the IRU standard layout, as Rebecca also mentioned, as our link. So this is the scope. It's a nice simple scope in many ways, but it's basically covered the transport service buyer, who could be either the consignor or the consignee in the previous terminology, the sender, of course, or also the consignor. And then we have these ideas. The proof of delivery is interesting. Rudy mentioned, I think, the fact that when goods arrive at their final destination, you are terminating two contracts. You're terminating the transport contract that was responsible for delivering it, and you're also terminating the sales contract because the buyer has actually received the goods from the seller. So that's an interesting area in its own right. Maybe for further discussion. So this is what I mentioned about the paper document being aligned to the electronic data structure. And you can see here the information that is in the data stream for a party. And this is the party box on the left-hand side where we would expect to find that information. So also we took into account the Eurasian Customs Union format that you see on the screen here, and we did some reference mapping work to make sure that there was a link between the data stream and this particular document format here. I'm only highlighting some of the work. It was an intense project, which was actually conducted very fast in terms of some of our projects, but it did have a lot of work went into making sure that the business requirement specification was completed and that the message structure or the data exchange structure suited the business requirements specifications completely. So this is the screen that I showed you yesterday, and this is the road example, if you like, of how to reuse the multimodal transport for a legalized electronic protocol transport contract document, here the ECMR. And I did show you yesterday that this is a customization. You might spot that this says road consignment, whereas if you were to do a bill of lading for maritime, for example, you could have maritime consignment there. So there's some customization possible, but the important thing is that however much you customize on the final version, you're always reusing the standard multimodal constructions within the MMT. We also produced the schema, and this is just an equivalent of the data exchange expressed in terms of the UNC fact schema language, and this is already also available, and people can take this and reuse it. But of course, as Rebecca also said, there are various formats that an XML schema or any other technology for data exchange could use. But what we are hoping is that our the definition of the data exchange structure, as we have produced it at the MMT, the multimodal level, will be one that people can reuse in their own environment and know that the semantics will be fully harmonized. Last but not least, I'm actually changing subject, Mario. I just wanted to show this one slide, and that is that it was mentioned yesterday about the concept of the pipeline data exchange standard, which is another project produced by the transport and logistics domain within UNC FACT, also based on the multimodal transport framework. This project is actually aimed at showing that administrations could get voluntary data at different points from earlier in the transport chain than they get their information at the moment for regulatory purposes. What this is describing is the fact that for regulatory reporting purposes, the data could come from the person who knows the data when they know it, and not the filtered and maybe changed data that is often available when the reporting happens much further down the chain. That was mentioned yesterday, and I just wanted to add that in here and in my presentation. So thank you very much. Mario, I hope I've caught up a little bit for timing, but that was my presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. No, it was perfect, and I hope people appreciated that. Thanks also for the last message, because you duly followed the discussion in the afternoon when representatives of the regulatory agencies notably the Director General of Azeri Customs noted that, well, you are doing these things on electronic documents, etc. But what is important for us is that we can use it to do our regulatory work. So thanks for that point. And of course, there are so many different interests in that whole process that it's difficult to fix them together. Never mind. Like we are now moving to the discussion, to the time for discussion. We have half an hour, which is good. There were several questions already. Maybe the people who are asking them may wish to elaborate on them and ask more. They were related to the security of information. Rudy addressed that slightly. Practical examples. Yesterday we had representatives from IRU. Maybe they want to join again. So please raise your hands and ask questions or put them in the chat area. Is there anybody wanting to ask? Or I can read one of the questions.
Yes, please.
Who is that?
Марио, есть Андрей Лунев, который поднял руку и который задавал один из первых вопросов.
Hello?
Yes.
So I represent digital logistics ecosystem at Accelerate Estonia. So we're trying to build something very similar to what Rudy described, but here locally for Estonia and Baltics, through Finland till Poland, let's say. And I would like to first of all thank everyone, Rudy first of all, and others for excellent presentations. And I have a question to Rudy. How far are you with blockchain now, and how you manage access control to the information? Because those CMR data is quite sensitive, especially for large carriers, for example, or large consignors or consignees. And it should be quite accurately handled. And because we face this question with our partners all the time. So no one wants to expose information, as they have this printed ECMR in the truck. Almost no one sees it, and they do not worry about some data leaks. So that's the question. Thank you.
Can I take the answer?
Please.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Of course, from the Benelux, under the umbrella of the EU DTLF, we have a lot of contacts with your team of Estonia, and we have a close relationship with the different initiatives. First of all, is saying that the real status today of the access of government authorities first to the ECMR providers that participate to the Benelux project is that they have an individual access one by one. That's one of the reasons why in the next part of the next step of the project, we want to create a common access point, and a common access point in a minimum configuration is going to be very close to an API gateway, but in the public domain. That means that it's going to be a closed community there. If I now look at the 13 service providers, they have created a consortium between them. So a private consortium whereby we, from government, we are observer, of course, and whereby they have initiated an initiative, I can send you the link later on, that they are using a blockchain environment to exchange information between the different ECMR service providers in such a way that a customer of one ECMR provider, when handing over the goods, or when you making a digital signature, they can share this information between different ECMR service providers in such a way that the customers of this ECMR provider, where the goods are loaded, where the goods are offloaded, they can use one single application to accept the data. This is the status right now of the project. We are looking in seeing what kind of information do we need to have in common between the ECMR service providers and the authorities. And there we also have the same situation as you mentioned, that of course the information is quite sensitive. Commercial information is sensitive, and we are looking for, in the exchange with government authorities, to have only a minimum required information which is shared between governmental authorities. And within the Benelux project, in close relation with the DTLF, we are identifying exactly what this information is required. Essentially, why we are collecting that? Because we want to make sure that road control authorities can access the CMR data by vehicle registration ID, whether it is a tractor or the trailer. I hope this answers your question. Blockchain, everyone is very bullish in the beginning, but when it comes to facts, I think that there is a difference in acceptance depending on the different players. But there are some ECMR service providers who have a solution which is completely based on a blockchain environment.
Thank you.
Thank you. I understand from my transport colleagues that there are many solutions for the for ECMR, but the regulatory authorities are more and more interested to have harmonized and standardized versions so that they can get the data. One of the questions here is whether GPS and temperature data, real-time temperature data, are included in the ECMR. Can somebody of the speakers respond to that?
So maybe you can.
Yeah, maybe I will try that one. Yes, Rudy mentioned that there are developments along the lines of the Smart Container Project, which is looking at Internet of Things information that can be brought into transport data exchanges to inform about such things as temperature control and other very important parameters. That work is going on right now and is nearly completed. And as Rudy mentioned, that will be available for extending the ECMR in the next project that we'll be running to take the ECMR project further forward. This will also be covering some of the regulatory aspects, as Rudy mentioned, such as concentrating on making sure that dangerous goods information is available, perhaps for during the journey, etc., etc. So yes, we will be including such things in the next version of the ECMR. Is that correct, Rudy?
Yes, sorry, is playing with, I think that I was looking, but some essential information about temperature sensitive data is already included in the first version, but I think that the answer looks more to, we are probably going to extend the new release with a lot of event related data, and events are typically reporting the actual situation of a consignment. And we see that also in the Benelux, the ECMR service provider, they already do track that information. Yeah, so it will be included. Is it required for government authorities? Sometimes the answer is even yes also.
Rebecca here. Can I just add to that? That from the legal aspect of the convention and the additional protocol, I mean, that is not specified as being needed, but, you know, I think it would fall under this Article 6, Paragraph 3 of the CMR, which allows for including any other particulars which the parties may deem useful. So it's optional for the parties from the legal point of view.
But Rebecca,
Yes.
if we look at in the air, especially in the air cargo world, where we have a lot of cool chain, we see that the temperature control is specific part of the contract agreement between a shipper and a transport service provider.
So sorry, which document or standard are you referring to, Rudy?
Well, the information to control the temperature, to report the temperature during the whole transport is part of the contract agreement between the shipper and the transport service provider. And for that reason is then included as a specific particular of the CMR agreement.
So what I meant by legal as in what is laid out in the convention. So it may be that the parties agree to attach these additional terms and then it becomes a legal aspect of their contract. But I'm just saying, let's, you know, purely from the convention and the additional protocol point of view, that's not specified, but there is the latitude for the parties to actually include such conditions. So it's consistent with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, yeah, it's just saying that when you go back to the convention, this is not specified, but it allows for this. So I just wanted to make that clear, that's all.
Thank you very much. Now we have Dmitry Akimenko from UNECE Community System, who has raised his hand. And then Kostas would like to make a comment, and then Mr. or Mrs. Yamets. Okay. So Dmitry, please.
Добрый день, коллеги. Слышно меня? Я хотел бы коротко прокомментировать, что мы начали в рамках нашей информационной системы портового сообщества практическую работу с форматом ECMR, который был разработан СИФАКТом. Мы уже неоднократно говорили на наших семинарах о необходимости гармонизации, стандартизации данных, но все равно мы видим достаточно много случаев, когда применяются нестандартные форматы электронных документов, поэтому особенно важно в таких документах, как ECMR, который используется участниками из различных стран, применение международных стандартов электронных документов. Хочу поблагодарить и Сью Проберт, и Кагишу Рамацу за ту работу, которую они сделали совместно с нами. Мы смогли сопоставить с их помощью референсную модель данных ECMR с реальными документами, используемыми на Украине, что, с одной стороны, позволило нам применить в своей системе действительно стандартный международный документ, а с другой стороны, дополнить саму референсную модель некоторыми элементами, которые в европейских странах были не востребованными, но используются на территории таких стран, как Украина, Белоруссия, ну и другие страны Восточной Европы. Поэтому это сотрудничество крайне важно, было взаимовыгодным, и самый главный момент в этом то, что оформление таких электронных документов, как электронный CMR через системы, которые используют стандартные форматы СИФАКТа, в том числе систему портового сообщества, позволяет другим участникам принимать и понимать эти документы без дополнительных преобразований. Еще раз спасибо.
Спасибо, Дмитрий. Kostas, you.
Yes, Mario, thank you very much for giving me the floor again. And just for a quick comment, and thanks very much to Sue and to Rudy for this. I really like them. I want to make this comment because actually Rudy mentioned that. I think it's very important to mention this challenge. You know, what Rudy mentioned about Belgium, it's a message that we receive from many countries at the moment. Countries that have acceded to ECMR or not. And Rudy mentioned Belgium hasn't acceded yet the ECMR because two main points, which is the trust of data and verification of the data. And actually that the need for ECMR service provider to exist. And this is actually a request from the market, as our colleague from Estonia mentioned before, but also, of course, from the government, like our police and customs authorities. So, to be honest with you, in UN, in UNECE Secretariat, in which direction to go. And that's why we have initiated also this project with Islamic Development Bank to start analyzing the different requirements and to see what they really like to see as a solution. Because the truth is that now there are already many solutions. I think there are more than 16 or 17 from the private sector. And this may be the case, I mean, in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe we'll have like 100 of those. And then the question is like how they are going to be, if they are going to be interconnected, and how the governments, I mean, at the borders, if they're checking, for instance, the ECMR with ETIR, which is my favorite thing, then they are sure the police authority that is an original one or it's from a transfer, so they can trust if you with the data. So Sue and my colleagues from Trade Division have done a great job on the standards, and this is much appreciated. We, my colleagues have done this work with ECMR protocol. There is something missing yet. We have to identify how to make this trustful, the data, and how sure that there is service providers that the governments can trust. Because, you know, it's not that the ECMR protocol developed in 2008. And 12 years afterwards, not so many contracting parties to the ECMR protocol. And this is not just happened. It is because the governments, they don't see the solution there. Anyway, this is a comment from my side. Again, very much to Sue and to for their excellent, really, presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. Shall we take now the question of Mr. Yemets? Well, the question is Пожалуйста, задайте вопрос.
Ясно. У Андрея Емца или пропал звук, или он не сообразил. Вопрос был следующий. Здравствуйте, я господин Емец. У меня есть вопрос к Руди. Могут ли микро и малые предприятия использовать вашу систему электронной накладной КДПГ, ЕЦМР, если у них отсутствует система ERP? ERP systems.
I hope I'm connected. The answer is more than yes. So we see in the Benelux environment that there are 13 ECMR providers really participating, authorized to participate, and we see that even a large share of the users are small and medium-sized companies who just use the ECMR service as a cloud service to which they subscribe, eventually integrate their own system, but there is absolutely no need that they have their own ERP or transport management system. On the contrary, it works fine for small companies. The adoption is very fast and the cost is very, very, very marginal to start it up. In practice, even we say that we advise as consultants, transport service providers to really try it out in a cloud service with customers, with suppliers, and then only integrate their back office system. So the answer is more than yes. Of course, all the ECMR service providers, they are a little bit different. Some are more concentrated on air cargo transport. Some are concentrated on waste transport. But we clearly see that the cloud environment is one of the very, very important features of an ECMR service provider. I hope this helps. And the answer, yeah.
Thank you. I also have a question to Rudy. In your presentation, there was this idea that the ECMR has 90% information for multimodal transport, and also you and Sue showed all these panoply of tools that have been developed. How easy or how difficult it will be to develop other transport documents, for example, the railway consignment note, the bill of lading, to such a level that you have done with the ECMR. Can one use what has been done for the ECMR if there is so much data which is common with other documents? Will it be easier to develop other documents?
Shall I take the answer first, Sue? Yeah. The answer is yes. The multimodal transport reference model is a model which consolidates many projects of different modes of transport, the business to business, business to administration. And when we started development of the ECMR, the only thing we just have to do is to make a subset, a selection of the elements of this model, like consignment, transport means, consignment item, consignee, and to see what is really required for the specific purpose of what we were trying to do. What we were trying to do there was to align this reference model with the UNECE, with the ECMR, with the CMR specification. I think that we spent most of the time with the legal experts to verify what is a sender, what is a consigner, what is a consignee, not really on selecting the data from the multimodal reference model. So the answer is yes. For some modes, there are going to be some adaptations to be made, but okay, we have a governance in place so that we can also change the multimodal structure when it makes sense.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, please.
Michael, sorry. Yes, please, if you want, Mr. Abdishakr.
Okay. Sorry, interrupted. I am Abdishakur from Somalia Customs. I have two questions and one commentary. This system is a very good system. My first question is, this system, can you tell me, Mr. Rudy, any countries in Africa are they work in any countries in Africa are they work in this system? And also, this system is a specific system can use only developed countries, or and they can use also developing countries. That's my two questions. Also, I have one comment related in this system. In Africa, we need this system, but we have many problems. For example, in Africa, we have tariffs. And I mean the price of goods and related taxation. And also, we have some conflicts related in policies. Also, this system still we need. How can that system working in Africa?
Thank you for this very interesting question. First of all, it's not a system that we have been building, but a set of semantics, a set of data models, so how the data are defined and how they fit together. The answer is quite obvious, because there is a very, very huge link between what is the data elements that we selected for the ECMR specification and the data elements, for instance, that are typically part of customs specification. They are, many of them are appearing in the two environments. So because the MMT is aligned with customs specifications, and maybe Sue can add something on that, we see that the same data elements are appearing on both sides. And because of that, I would say that because of the close relationship with the WCO environment, I would say it's a very, very close relationship. There is a difference between WCO and MMT, and there is a fundamental definition that MMT is also driven from a business-to-business perspective, while the WCO data model is driven from a business-to-government perspective. I make it a little bit too simple here, but okay, it's my input to your question. So a consignee, a consigner, they are appearing in the two documents, but I think that the information in the MMT is more complete because there is also a business-to-business data sharing environment. The WCO is, of course, the environment of customs. And of course, it has another role, but the two are continuously aligned. Maybe about this alignment, someone can complete my answer here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, maybe I could make a comment or two. Certainly, the main focus of UNC Factor, if I can wear my chair hat again, is that we help to define the semantics that can be used for data exchanges between parties. So we're not talking about building systems, as Rudy rightly said. What we're trying to do is help, because when two parties exchange data externally to each other, they need a common structure in order to do so. We may have another question about that coming up in a minute, but also with relation to the World Customs Organization, we have a new project which we are hoping to work on during this 2020 year, which will help to identify where the data in the business-to-business world fits with the reporting requirements of not only customs, but other regulatory bodies, particularly in a single window environment. Thank you.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of our time, but there is one question from Michael Dill. Let me voice it. Kostas mentioned that there are about 16 different ECMR solutions that he has seen, and there might be 100 in a year. So what is the solution? How to either replace some with one standard or to link them, or B, what shall serve as a semantic and technical anchor? And I imagine this is a question to all the speakers. If you would like to say something, we don't have much time.
So shall I start from the standards point of view, as I think this question is relating to standards? Thank you, Michael. I did mention yesterday in my presentation that the multimodal transport model and the other reference data models, the reference word is very important. What can be used is those structures can be used as reference points to enable harmonization across different existing implementations. And of course, for future implementations, then we would love to see that the data exchange structures that we produce out of UNCFACT on a global perspective and a multimodal perspective could be used as anchors. So thank you for your question, Michael.
From my side, I had a very simple answer. I think what puts them all together is a logical data model between the different solutions. That makes them interoperable. And depending on the scope of the data sharing, there will be other types of data structures being shared. But a logical data model, a common data model, which is used in an EDI, in a message-oriented architecture, or which is the same then used in a web service API architecture, I think that's going to glue them together. If we have an address in an API, well, that address needs to have the same content, the same syntax as an address when it is used in a classic ADFACT or an ADI or a message. So for me, the logical multimodal data model is what it binds together. And that's, I think, the heart of the MMT also.
And Rebecca here, I think why we're having so many pilots actually emerging and having some differences between them is that the ECMR is actually silent on specifications related to technology. So in a similar way to the CMR, which did not specify the format or the layout of how the paper consignment note should look, the ECMR has not specified these technological specifications. It was obviously deliberate by the drafters to have some neutrality here. And a couple of years ago, that's certainly how we were thinking, you know, to see how it would develop in this space. But because there are increasingly more questions coming in particular from the countries, it could be that this may be an aspect that might be addressed in the work of this informal group that I did mention that is doing this research paper. Let's see, I'm not sure yet, but indeed there have been a lot of questions in this space. I don't know if Costas is still there and might want to add something.
Well, yes, I'm definitely here, and I don't want really to add something. Michael's question is, it's a very critical. I said that today there might be like 16 solutions or even more, and possibly in 2 years' time will be like 100. But I don't know what is the solution yet. I just we have identified a challenge, if you wish, from the government's point of view as UNECE. And we want to see if this will be a problem in the future or not, and what could be a possible solution. Again, I'm referring not to the standards. I'm referring to the CMR service provider, as Rudy said, that Belgium mentioned already. I said this is something that it comes to us from many governments. So this is a challenge there, and I don't know yet if there is a solution and what kind of solution. This is only I mentioned.
Anyway, like I believe that in this seminar, and we are getting to the end, like Mr. Fedorov wanted to speak as well. In this seminar, the idea is to help the countries in Eastern Europe, in the Eastern Partnership, Guam, etc., to use what is available to develop their digital corridors. And I would say that from this seminar, we can recommend that they use the what has been prepared as standards, the schemas, BRS, for the ECMR to use them in their projects. And I believe we can continue that discussion in the afternoon. Alexander Fedorov, you are going to moderate the discussion in the afternoon. So do you still want to speak now? Or you will take...
Спасибо, Мария. Думал снять вопрос, но последние вопросы и ответы как раз усилили необходимость задать этот вопрос. Что касается различных вариантов и подходов передачи данных электронной, накладной, здесь вопросов как бы и не возникает. Техническое решение может быть любое. Что касается набора данных, это прежде всего касается отправителя-получателя и их договора. Они могут оговаривать любые другие условия. Это договор частное право. Что касается регулятивных органов, прежде всего контролирующих, это контроль движения транспортного средства, возможно, по установленному маршруту. Первое очень критическое. Второе – это таможенные органы и те требования, которые выдвигаются к этому документу. Вы знаете, что сама ЦМР не является одним документом, который предъявляется таможенным органам. Это может быть еще декларация, это может быть книжка МДП, которая содержит такой же набор в большинстве своем, таких же данных. Но те пилотные проекты и те отправки, которые были произведены на территории Европейского Союза, не предполагали наличие границ. Мой вопрос. Целостность данных, идентификация, аутентификация и доверие тем данным и согласование тех форматов, которые могут не просто уже применяются между отправителем и получателем и поставщиком услуг, но и таможенным органам, другим органам, которые имеют право контроля, в частности дорожной полиции, и взаимное признание тех отметок на этих электронных документов, хотя это уже не электронный документ, а набор данных, подтвержденный или утвержденный одной или второй стороной. Вот в этом и заключается та идея, каким образом согласовать не количество тех решений, которые существуют, а каким образом согласовать признание действий стороны отправления госоргана, последующим госорганам и так далее на протяжении всей цепи поставок. А это может быть и 5, и 6, и 10 стран. Было бы, конечно, интересно услышать точку зрения представителя Digitexud, который у нас сегодня присутствует, но этот вопрос я обращаю прежде всего к Ребекке, Костасу, Руди и, конечно же, госпоже Сью Проберт. Кто-то из них может сейчас вкратце ответить, есть ли уже решение и есть ли такой тест. Почему вопрос задаю? Потому что мы как раз, делая вот этот проект между Литвой, Белоруссией и Украиной на первоначальном этапе, имеем 3 совершенно разные права. Право таможенного союза, право Европейского союза и то право, которое существует в Украине. И вот он как раз и покажет на сильные и слабые стороны любого технического решения по электронной КДПГ или электронной ЦМР и может дать дальнейший толчок к развитию этих технологий. Благодарю.
Anyone wants to comment on this?
I think this is actually a very big question. Perhaps it's actually better to be taken offline in that sense because it does get into quite a lot of different issues. But I'd be interested to also hear what Sue and Rudy and if Kostas also has anything else to say.
Okay, from my point of view, when I'm not wearing my UNCFAC chair, which I always wear with pride, I'm actually a working person as well, and I do work on the EU CDM data modeling for the EU and for other countries in their custom systems over the years. I've contributed to that, so I'm very well aware of the issues that you're raising, Alexander. But as to the solutions, then I think it's something we just have to bear in mind that, as I mentioned yesterday and today, legal aspects as well as the data exchange technical aspects definitely need to be taken into consideration as well. And we just need to work towards a better understanding. But there is a lot of difference. I mean, Customs authorities, regional or national, often have their own code sets. This is something that traditionally has always been the case. Well, the fact that there are different codes used in different countries, different regions, and they're required can form a barrier. And these sorts of things take time, but we have to work together to see how much we can achieve. Thank you for your question, Alexander.
I confirm also from the Benelux project that, of course, the initial project was being driven through the ECMR. But once we look into border controls, and remember, we have lots of border controls now with the UK, but also with air cargo, with maritime traffic. And the idea remains always to have a basic common data set that can be used for both commercial transport and border control purposes. That came out of the information pipeline. And then depending on the consumer, who is using the data, accessing data, what are the rights of this end user, then the data can be presented in different formats. That's the whole, if we look at the consortiums of the Commission, the Phoenix and the Federated Consortium, this is really part of what they want to achieve there. It's not easy, but as long as people are sitting together and they have common definitions, a common willing to align with each other, I think we go step by step, but okay, it's step by step.
Thank you very much, Rudy. This concept goes along with the same ideas that we have discussed in the last Odessa seminar and in this one. Build a common data set, and the data can go into different documents, processes, legal regimes, etc. So thank you very much. And maybe on this excellent note for our seminar, which is looking at the corridors passing through Odessa and Ukraine, like the Black Sea corridor and the Guam corridor, like the idea would be to use them there. So probably we should stop for 15 minutes coffee break, and the next session will start at 11:30 Central European Time, or 12:30 in Ukraine and Belarus. So please join us in 15 minutes when Mr. Fyodorov will be moderating the next session. Thank you very much to all the speakers, Rebecca, Kostas, Rudy, and Sue, and to everybody who was listening and asking questions. Thank you very much.